Everybody, welcome to the first WMC of this triennium. Welcome to the new member Terry. Welcome to Councillor Gregory. There have been no apologies so far, so hopefully Angus will arrive. I will start by asking Penhair to start with the karakia, please.
Thank you, Chair. E tu atua whakatuwhera tia mai e koe kia mātou e tēnei hui nā huare o te tika, o te oro, o te pono, o te maramatanga a mātou. Ia whakamoemiti e whakakroria ki te ingoa tapu. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Chair. And just for the Tangata Whenua members who have rolled over, we support your welcomes this morning. Also, I think just talking prior to the our meeting, going through the consents brought up a lot of memories.
Yeah.
And some especially. And I think the two Ruru boys are one. I've seen Bill's submission again. And then just remembering what John did at the beginning of this new period of getting things across the line and negotiating with Ronald to put in place what we thought were achievable outcomes at that time. So just acknowledge to those ones that have gone before and who have helped us, and thank you for blessing the ones that are with us now to go.
Sure. Thank you. I agree. When I read through all the history of the consent, I saw Ronald's name in there, 2007. Long time ago. Okay, bear with me while I'm trying to go between a paper agenda and my online notes. I will do my best. Just for the record, the Gisborne Herald may be taking photos as we're having our meeting. So just be aware, make sure you've got your lovely smile on. Okay, so we have no apologies. I understand Angus will be coming. We will go to the minutes on page 5 and have confirmation of our non-confidential minutes. I wasn't at that meeting, so.
I'm happy to second.
Does it have to be standard, does it? So it's moved by Penny Brown. Shannon, second by Penny. All those in favour? Contrary? Are there any declarations of interest? Just lots. We can move to the action sheet. Are there any comments on the action sheet? Any feedback? Any questions? Yeah. All good. We're skipping the governance action plan at the moment because we're going to cycle back to that. I'm going to change the order of the papers that we've got today because I understand that some members may be leaving to attend a tangi, just to let you all know. There are no leaves of absence, no acknowledgements and tributes. So I'm going to jump straight to the reports of the Chief Executive and staff for decision. So just so you know, I'm going to go to the appointment of the Deputy Chair and then straight to the wastewater consent decision reports, just in terms of order, then to the terms of reference for the Kiwa Group, and last we will do the annual report. Just want to make sure we cover off what's necessary before some people may have to leave. Where are we? So we're on.
Sorry, do we know if we will have a quorum when the participants leave this morning? We'll maintain a quorum.
Okay, so we're on page 13, appointment of the Wastewater Management Committee Deputy Chairperson. I sent out an email last night on this, noting that I have sought clarification from the Chief Executive, and the Deputy Chair does not have to be a councillor. And so I would like to nominate Leroy Pardo to be the Deputy Chairperson. Second, are there any other nominations from around the table? No? So you're happy to go straight to the vote for the chairperson, deputy chairperson? So because this is a nomination of a person, we need to have a show of hands. So if all in favour, please raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so now page 16, we're now going into information reports. Sorry, we're not going to 16. We're going to jump straight to the last report, which is the wastewater consent decision reports. Now, I'm trying to find it. Sorry, I'm going backwards and forwards. 73. I requested this paper be brought to the committee so that everyone could refresh themselves on the history of this, what's been quite a contentious issue for our region. And I agree with what Penny said earlier, that there's a lot of information in here and a lot of history. What I would have hoped is that everyone would have read it and seen the amount of material that is in the consent conditions, that we are directly responsible for compliance and delivery. And if those around the table would like to put forward agenda items they would like to see this committee address in the coming year. Obviously, we've got things such as the AUD, we've got the Tūranganui Water Quality Enhancement Project. But having read all those reports, I'd like feedback on possible agenda items going forward that will create our governance work plan in the coming year. So I open it all to you to provide.
Chair, I'll start it off. There was a period where Ronald and I were having trouble adjusting to the fact that we were held accountable to the long-term plan. Suddenly, out of left field, this other animal snaked towards us. And it was interesting in reading the consents where there was in fact money put aside in the long-term plan. I'm getting the periods mixed up now until 2025, I think. And then when we were having the discussions, we couldn't find that amount when we were discussing about things being too costly. So I don't wish to go back and maybe try and work out whether I'm correct or not, but it is just appreciating the drivers that council have and learning them earlier rather than later, which was what happened to Tangata Whenua 18 months ago. Suddenly other things came and we've been on a journey and we were being directed by other drivers, as I said. So that's just one thing that I'd like to keep in the governance plan or whatever, to be aware of those long-term obligations, not only so that Tangata Whenua knows what they are, so that we can hold the council accountable that they do remember what they are themselves as well.
Sure. Thank you.
So through you, Madam Chair, if it's okay with the committee members, I'll just ask for clarification because we'll be putting some of these things into the governance work plan coming forward. So just further to your point, Penny, is it if we put into the governance work plan around the LTP development and showing the decision timeframes coming through. So for example, in other committees, there will be financial considerations, those reports coming to this committee for you to see how the LTP is progressing and the development of the long-term plan, because it's just starting now around the asset management plan and those things. So having some of those become as part of the reporting process to this committee, would that suffice?
The main one for me is when Peter pays Paul. It's when sacrifices are made from one budget to address to the next one that I think we need to be alerted to.
Yeah, so if I could just, I really like that idea because I agree the speed bump we hit 18 months ago. So we're talking about getting a better connection with the long-term plan processes and ensuring that we are part of it, but also the connection to council itself and its decision-making body, which we heard the Mayor allude to at our induction process, is we need to enable this community this committee to be closely connected to the council decision-making table and keep them better informed to avoid such matters that were experienced 18 months ago. Councillor Dowsing?
Thank you. One thing that struck me going through the report was the quality of the submissions we received throughout the period of obtaining these consents. And a lot of what was submitted, I think we've addressed through various pieces of research and as a committee going through the process of developing our strategy. And I'd like to see those submissions brought to the fore again, and essentially be able to put a line through some of those and see if there's any that we haven't addressed and that we should be, just to make sure that just to cement our path forward. Because I think that lots of them were sensible, lots of them were speculative and in their nature, but I think it's worth just reconsidering them and making sure that we're moving forward with those in mind.
So I'll just get some clarification on that. Are you talking about going right back to 2007 through to the current day?
Yeah, as I say, a lot of them we can put a line through and know that we've addressed it through research.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, some pieces were there that I think we can still make sure that we're incorporating into our plans. And
Sure, thank you. Any other suggestions for agenda items? Leroy?
Yes. Again, I'll pull out my crack record. I'm looking to just continue the momentum we've started with the alternative use and disposal. I think we're sort of partway through the project in terms of the initial treatment or that secondary treatment, but I think for it to get some real legs, we need to start addressing the alternative use and disposal and how we're going to manage that going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Sheldrake?
Yes, I'd like to endorse that. I think that could come at us a lot sooner than we might be thinking, and the readiness out within the community. So I certainly endorse that.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
I'd just like to comment about that as well, because it's the same with any topic. The more you talk about it, the more acceptance it becomes. And obviously there's a lot of perception out there at the moment. And even as this journey has begun over the last, since we've been talking about AUD, you can just read different things with different growers and different producers out there that the attitude is changing. It's changing as the world is evolving, coming to grips with climate change and everything. So I think the AUD thing is really important in the next stage after that to achieve that. So I think the more that we can report on alternative use and disposal and the tools that we're going to use, the community that we embrace to bring on board, the better. So I really applaud. I'm totally behind that.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Dowsing?
thank you. On the same note, I was just trying to find it here, but there was wording around implementation of AUD in the report, and it was around best endeavours to achieve. Our current council motion doesn't make any mention of best endeavours to achieve. It's only finding I think it's affordable and practical method for alternative use and disposal, which doesn't essentially have any teeth or any direction about how we achieve that. So I think perhaps a good starting point for this committee is to address what delivery mechanisms might trigger the building of a wetland.
Thank you. So more direction on AUD and where we're going to go. Yep. Sure. I've got,
Chair,
Penny?
this is more a casual comment. To me, 2007 is not that far back. But I'm surprised at the naivety that all parties
so mine.
all parties displayed. Yes, I'm I think the words to meet the intention were honourable in those days, but as Shannon is saying, the words to meet those intentions today are said in a different light. And I think we just need to be careful on how we do go forward. And we do need to acknowledge that a lot has changed.
Yes.
And one's interpretation is going to be significantly different than where we started from. Thank you.
Councillor Dowsing?
Having a lot of discussion, but I think it's worth noting that a lot has changed, but a lot is still the same. Clause 4 on page 176, the permit holder shall use its best endeavours to ensure that a single BTF plant commissioning occurs by 31st December 2010 and wastewater disinfection by 31st December 2012, and in any event no later than the 31st of December 2014. And 5 years later, that is the approved process that we are now delivering exactly to the word of what we were told to deliver 5 years ago. So I think to be fair to the intentions of this committee, identifying our intentions by what that statement that council made and getting that addressed at the council table as well, so that it means something, not just so that we've got actions to take to achieve it instead of just being words on paper, essentially.
In all fairness to council, there were delays from that deadline, 2012 and 2014, that were agreed around the table. So, but yes, 5 years behind. Ronald?
So, best endeavours, Shannon, was hard fought. So this goes back to 2004, when we first started the process around the BTF and other things. So, and it was a compromise wording that we came to. So as Penny acknowledged, John Rue earlier in our conversation, he was the one who, excused the language, but didn't trust council. Right? But we compromised best endeavours. So clause 8 of that was about best endeavours for AUD, but it was, again, a compromise that iwi allowed to push things forward. And you're right, Amber, we amended, made variations to the current consent to allow time lapses. And I think in some respects that's come back and bitten us as iwi, because we ran out of time to do a number of things. So I would like to see stronger wording around best endeavours and for council to move that. But I also acknowledge that council and members on this committee have moved well forward.
Thank you. So I've got my own list here of agenda items. First and foremost, as I mentioned in my email last night, is monitoring and ensuring progress towards stage 2 of the wastewater treatment plant. We've got a December 2020 deadline. That's probably the number one goal that we should all have on our mind, is monitoring that progress and ensuring we support the staff to deliver it. The second one I had was AUD. AUD, I agree. We need better direction. I even considered maybe a pilot study funding, get some funding for a pilot study to see if we could take some of that water on a small scale before you make it bigger. Should we be preparing a work plan for the Tūranganui-a-Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Plan? We are responsible for its development and implementation, and at this stage we've never really, well, I don't believe we've given very clear direction. Do we need some real big projects in there to keep it going? I know it has been dealing with mortuary waste, the Tikaraka Oxidation Pond and the Pao Kahu, but it probably would be worthwhile spending some time on on that project to see what we really need to put inside it. The other one was council investment, a paper on council investments in wastewater collectively. And by that I mean the wastewater treatment, the reticulation system, and the monitoring that council does for wastewater, and all of the associated costs with that. And lastly was industrial treatment, to keep a close eye on, as we progress stage 2 and we clean up the discharge that goes out into the bay, industry is going to have to come alongside us and also meet the consent conditions. And should we spend some time talking about how do we bring industry beside us and on this journey so that they don't get a shock at the end of it that says, oh, you now need to increase your treatment to ensure that we meet our discharge standard at the end of the pipe. And lastly was, I would like a paper on the wastewater treatment plant bypasses. So what are the, how frequent are bypasses at the treatment plant itself? What volumes are we talking about going out that are untreated? And what alerts do we get? So those were the ones that jumped out at me that I thought would be helpful on our governance work plan going forward. Councillor Dowsing?
Mentioning the industrial waste, there seems like there's potential for opportunity there. We've discussed a second BTF and a reduction of price in a second BTF. Perhaps there's a consideration that industry may wish to partner to have infrastructure on our site instead of theirs.
Yes.
And enhance our site so that we can take their volume through treatment.
Yes.
So it's worth consideration. Whether that's an effective treatment method for their waste, I'm not sure. But.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just a comment on that. I've just been recently on the other side of the board as far as resource consent for our industrial application and industrial wastewater disposal. And I have to really commend the improvement or the goals that are being asked for industry to be set for their water quality. You know, it's actually, even though it's quite costly, but at the end of the day, we're all accountable, and we're all accountable for the waste that we are putting into the system. And ideally, if we can have our industrial waste with our municipal waste going into the same place and having the same outcome, that would be the ultimate goal. But, you know, like I said, I really commend the extra emphasis that's been put on water quality coming out of the industry at the moment, and for new industry setting up as well.
Sure. Thank you. Leroy?
Yeah, the other area I think we certainly get lots of interest on is the mortuary waste, and I think we've been giving out assurances that it is in hand, but it's sort of, so we've got to a point of agreement, but we're sort of stalling on bylaws and things like that passed. So I think we just, again, it's been raised certainly by tangata whenua as an issue, and I'd like to see just don't take the foot off the accelerator on that one. We really need to get that across sooner rather than later. And yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Sheldrake?
Just picking up on the point of, you know, engagement with the businesses, I think, you know, some form of forum, take them on the whole journey from now all the way through. You know, they'll be scathing if they felt they weren't kept on board, and particularly there's going to be some significant cost to some of those businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Through the chair, just to reassure the committee, the businesses who are going to be affected by this, it is in their consents. They are well aware that this is tracking through. The other point to make on the BTF in our plant, there are wastes which are not suitable to put into our plant as well, particularly the BTF. So for example, if it has a very high organic matter already in the waste stream, when it goes into our plant, it would effectively suffocate the BTF and the bugs that are in there. So we do have to be careful around what can and can't go into that plant. Unfortunately, some of the very rich in protein wastes, if we put those in, we would have a very adverse reaction in the plant. So it's going to be a mixture of working through with industry, what level they can get things to, and then whether or not we're able to take them after that. But all of the big consent holders know that this is coming and know that this is in train.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just a question. Is there any examples of, I mean, ultimately, our ultimate goal is a wetland, even though we're not, it's part of the next 10-year plan, but is there any examples of areas around the country that have got their industrial waste going through a wetland in a successful manner?
Through the chair, there are specific industries that do have wetlands that they use for some types of wastewater, but it very much does vary. So I'm aware of a tannery that is able to use some of their wastewater that goes through. I'm also aware of a sawmill that it depends on what the water has been used for, and a lot of it is actually cooling liquid that is used to put through a wetland. So there are some small scale versions, but nothing on a scale that we've been talking about.
So another question, in situations like that, are they dispersing to the ocean like we are? If it's not acceptable for them?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of them discharging to ocean. They normally it's almost a pre-treatment before it gets into the main wastewater stream, the industrial line. Wastewater wetlands for industry are quite different to sewage wastewater wetlands. You ordinarily don't combine the two.
Have we had a mover and a seconder for this paper of the consent decision reports? Councillor Dowsing, second Councillor Sheldrake. Is there any further discussion, or should we move this paper? All those in favour? Contrary? Thank you. Now we're going to jump to the terms of reference for the Kiwa Group, which is page 67. Would you like to talk to this first?
Sure. So through the chair, this paper was requested by the committee to come early on in your triennium, and the opportunity that we're working through is with the amount of work that we have going forward at the moment. For council selfishly and for this committee, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate channels and discussions happening at the right level across Tauranga, to make sure that we have the input that we need to come into discussions as you've just raised around mortuary waste, the AUD, but then also looking at the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. You will be after advice that is not council. You will probably also want to understand better cultural considerations and the wider effects on the whole bay going forward. So part of the whole purpose of the Kiwa Group is to make sure that you are able to get that advice separately from us, and it also helps inform us and our work development of program going forward as well. So this is a really key thing for council and for you as a committee going forward, is having a mandated and constituted Kiwa Group that you're able to task with developing up a work program for you to then bring back and report alongside our governance work plan. They would also be able to report back on what work they have been progressing and report back on what it is that you want it to be looked into. As council, we're able to support the committee, support the Kiwa Group once we know what the work program is and understand what budget requirements would be made. So we would be able to find some of that from operational budgets to help support, depending on what it is, of course, that we're able to develop up and go forward with there.
So any discussion, any comments? Ronald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to note firstly, the apology from Ian Rue. So I'm assuming Ian's had input into the drafting of the terms of reference. I'm quite happy with that, Madam Chair.
So sorry, just to clarify, these are the terms of reference that you have previously adopted. This is the, we adopted these like a couple of years ago, Wolf. More than a couple of years ago.
Beginning of the last term. Okay.
Chair, if I could just carry
Kenny?
on while Ronald's finding his next point. So in that one, I think previously we were trying to get these groups initiated into the council process. On reflection and in the new review going forward, I'm not too sure that this grouping can hold the mandate that this grouping may have had. And it was prior to 2016, 16, when we first started with this group. If you have a look at the piece of paper that we've got for Turanganui QA activity one, that memorandum, that's where the designation of those groups came forward. And I'm just going to use Wong Whakaata as an example. Yes, I know that I could work with this group and you could get input from Wong Whakaata in this group, but at the end of the day, Wong Whakaata will want to make their own submissions independently as well. So that has to be taken on board going forward in the next review.
Yes.
The other reason why some of us got a little bit antsy 8 months ago was that this by default hasn't been an active group because we were always around the table here, we were always at the WTAG, and we got Ian's group. Then we saw its resurrection. That was okay, but we saw where its resurrection was heading towards, and that worried us. So with your David with Lifelines, Cato with relationships.
Transformation.
Yes, and we saw this body go that way. We thought, what the hell is this all about? And some of us got, as I said, there is an element of just trying to work out what you want that group to do. If it's relationships and it's in Cater's pot, not in David's, where it's the nuts and bolts stuff, then we as Tangata Whenua need to understand that and help manage where that group will lie and who it will be responsible to. Thank you, Chair.
So through the chair, if I can clarify, one of the things we're working forward, or our advice on this group would be, this is a group to help us move forward with the wastewater treatment plant next phase and ensuring that Tangata Whenua input is around the practical design and operation of the plant. It's also around moving forward mortuary waste. It's around moving forward the AUD options as well. So when we talk about representation from Tangata Whenua, it's potentially not at the level sitting around this table, it's at Wolf's level. So this is a technical group where we're talking about how we have practical conversations to bring back up to make recommendations to you as a committee around some of the things that we've talked about operationally. Absolutely, your point, Penny, around it's not something around Cater's area. If there's the mortuary waste development or policy bylaw will come up to this table through that group, but the purpose of the Kiwa group is more around how we manage the work that we have in front of us, ensure that we have early input and early engagement to inform any of the decisions or designs that are being made.
Councillor Dowsing?
Thank you. It seems as if Kiwa has very similar outcomes as this committee, but we hold more knowledge in this committee for the reason it's been long standing, but meeting far more regularly. I wonder if it wouldn't be more practical for this committee to simply have quarterly workshops to meet the requirements of that. But it seems like we're creating double duty where it doesn't necessarily need to be. But I'm not sure, was this was this part of the consent requirements? Yeah, okay.
And I think that we heard David say that the purpose of the group is for there to be an independent group from council in this committee that can provide advice and information to the Kiwa group or the leaders that sit around this table. Is that correct?
So just to clarify, there's two parts that we're talking about. There is the project, which is the Turanganui Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Project. And you get to define what happens as part of that. So it's around research, monitoring, planning, and specific projects that aim to improve the Māori and water quality of Turanganui Kiwa. That's clause 19. So it's a project. It doesn't mean you need to have a mandated group necessarily. Our advice is that a group that can talk about it at a technical and operational level will be able to then make recommendations up for your decision at this table. So our advice is that it's a different skill set, it's a technical skill set. So for the likes of Wolf and Ian in the past, they're able to engage in a much deeper level of technical detail because this is what they do. This is, and it's similar to Wastewater Technical Advisory Group type level of discussion. So it's around having the experts in the room as part of that. What we're promoting or putting forward to you for your consideration is having a group with mandated representatives from each of the tangata whenua to sit with council to be able to sit down and talk through the operational detail that needs to be done around how we improve the mode of water quality of Te Ranganui.
Leroy?
Yes, thank you for that, David. I think in reforming this group, I think while technical expertise is going to be important, I think we also need to broaden the scope of it a bit because there's a number of economic and other considerations which need to be modelled into proposals as to how we, particularly with the alternative use and disposal, as to how we might use this. And while the technical science, if you like, will be done, I think there are other wider considerations which will add value to any conclusions or end uses that we might come to.
Yes.
So I'd like to just see that sort of maybe broadened out a bit, the consideration for membership of that.
So technical can mean economic and, yeah, it's not purely scientific. Yeah.
So,
Penny Brown?
Chair and Dave, so maybe it's a work plan we're looking for, and then we can consider the membership and the qualities of people to enact that on our behalf.
So through the chair, would the committee be comfortable with us putting together a draft work plan for that group as council to then for your consideration as to how you would want to change that and move that forward? Is that okay?
Chair, I'll support that. I think, as I said in the past, there hasn't been a division, but I think we're mature enough now to acknowledge there is a need for the two, what happens at this table and what we can instill into this table. So yes, I support that.
That fits nicely with the agenda item I asked for under the work plan for the Te Ranganui Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Project. Councillor Dowsing?
Thank you. One piece of work I'd like to see out of this, and it was saying that stood out to me in the consents document, was that there was difficulty in identifying source of pollutants in the sense that a lot of the water coming out of our rivers already has a high E. coli level, et cetera. Going forward with our desire to have so much improvement through our treatment processes, it'd be good to understand how we can monitor river versus ocean outfall comparatively and understand, you know, what the level of pollutant coming out of the river is versus what we're outputting through our system. It may guide future discussion around where we actually put energy into our region.
Yes. Council has those responsibilities under the state of the environment reporting, so we are currently doing that.
Yes,
Rivers versus.
Yeah, it was just the report was
Comparison.
clear that we didn't have good understanding of which is contributing what quantity.
Any other comments on the, so just, I'll have one clarification. This paper was going to council on the 19th of December. Can we let it lie on the table and come through this committee before it goes to council? Yes, so this committee would prefer to know what the work plan is before we determine who's going to be in this group. Does that sound correct with the committee? Because the one thing I did note in terms of the terms of reference is we're still referring to engineering and works. I think there's just some terminology that needs to be cleaned up. Engineering works manager in there. All right, did we get that moved and seconded?
Sorry, Chair, I'm just,
Penny?
it's the work plan that council would want to see as opposed to the membership?
No, what I was meaning is you mentioned having the work plan for the Tūranginui-a-Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Project defined, which will happen around this table with a report from staff. And once we've seen that and happy with it, we'll then proceed to the terms of reference and the makeup of the Kiwa group.
I'm keen to get on that 19th of December agenda, especially with the terms of reference. I don't think the council need to know the makeup of the group, because that might take a little bit longer.
Okay, so we could split it into two. Is that what you're suggesting? The terms of reference and not necessarily the mandated members?
Yes,
Can we do that?
it will take us longer to approach people and get a good fit.
Sure.
So through the chair, if the committee is agreeable, we'll take away the draft terms of reference, refresh it now to make sure titles and things are correct, but we won't change anything around the purpose of the group or the terms of reference to then bring back to that council meeting. So we will update it to 2019 to hit that time frame as a draft. We will circulate it to the committee prior to it going on the council agenda in case there's any concerns so that you can read it quickly. We'll track the changes into the document so you can see what we have changed and what we haven't. And then we can put it to council to then come back to this committee with the governance work plan for you then to appoint who would sit on that group going forward. Is that okay?
So it'll be important that everyone responds to that email to give an indication that they're happy with the terms of reference before we go to council. Please. Okay, so this was just an information report for noting. Could someone like to move it? Councillor Dowsing. Second, Penny Brown. All in favour? Contrary? Thank you. And now we've been sorry that we've been all over the place today in our order of our agenda. So our last paper we've got is the Wastewater Management Committee Annual Report. There's a lot of reading in this one. Again, it's just an information report. But any discussion on the annual report that we give to the Chief Executive? Sorry, 16, on page 16. Someone like to move it? Yeah, Penny Brown moved. Second, Leroy Pardo. No discussion, just reading. Councillor Dowsing.
Just one point, which was it was great to see some timeframe around the separation of mortuary waste earlier. Good to see that plan on a page with that, those dates against it.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, it goes to the Chief Executive, doesn't it? Yeah. Goes to. So no further comments? We'll put it to the table. All in favour? Contrary? Thank you. There are no other items on our agenda. There was one thing I wanted to pick up on one of the reports I read today in the consent document. It was the 2007 decision document for the consent, and it was made by Mr. Kite, who was the independent facilitator of the WAG group, the Wastewater Adjournment Review Group. And I really liked what he said. He talked about the wastewater end product. And I thought it'd be quite nice just to finish on thinking about wastewater, the end of the wastewater process being a product, which fits quite nicely into the AUD as we go forward. It'd be really nice if we could continue that language of talking about an end product. And it's not necessarily a waste that needs to be thrown away. So that was 2007. So the language was there then. It'd be nice if we could continue with it. Were there any other matters the committee would like to bring up before we close it? Ronald?
Sorry, Madam Chair. I just wanted to give a bit of an acknowledgement to Bill. Was many
Yes.
years working on this committee, not always in our favour as iwi, but acknowledge his efforts. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Chair, just, I acknowledge Bill Ruru and John Ruru, but John Quaife was one too that I can remember back. He was doing a lot of backwards and forward, and he's still around.
Yes.
But I can't quite put my hand on, but I do think the work that's gone into the board pack, especially the review of last year's work and the background notes of where we can go to find stuff.
Yes.
We did, on reflection, we did a hell of a lot. So I do appreciate that in that annual plan, there's some of those big decisions, there's nothing Wolfgang's stepped them through and said what papers we go back to find those particular decisions. And I found that very helpful.
Thank you. Well, if that's all, we could close our meeting. Penny, would you like to close with our karakia? Thank you.
Secretary Chair. Nā whakamoemiti ki te atua, kia mau tono ki runga ki a tātou katoa, te atapai o te atua, te aroa o te karaiti, e whiwhi nā tonotanga i te wairua taku ake ake, amen.
Amen. Thank you. The meeting's closed. Wow. And I've just received an apology from Angus. That came in at 9:20. So we could probably acknowledge that, I'd say.